Once again, it's indeed a pleasure to host the event on the theme Sustainable Development Goals 2030, the way forward. This event from the Conrad Stifting. MMA is a partnered with Conrad Stifting along with Prakriti to host this event this evening. And we have Mr. Krishna mute. Yeah, thank you. We have very, very distinguished panelists. And today, my best wishes to each one of you on the occasion of the International Environment Day, which is being celebrated all over. But I can assure you that the celebration comes once in a year, but we are now desired to make it at least meet once in a month on the environmental issue. With so many things happening around us, we are going to make it happen. And I can assure you that every month you will have an interesting event to get your attention to some of the very, very important issues what is facing. And we have got an outstanding panelist. I'll introduce you a short while from now. But anyway, let me also tell you, welcome a couple of other people who have joined us in different part of the thing. To welcome everybody formally from Madras Management Association. And also set the context, I will request Mr. Mahalingam Kannan. He is Honorary Treasurer of MMA and also Chairman of the Board of Governance to deliver the formal welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Mali.
Thank you, Vijay Kumar. Warm welcome to all of you on International Environment Day. It is indeed my privilege and honor to deliver the formal welcome address here on the very special panel discussion, Sustainable Development Goals 2030, the way forward. On this momentous occasion, as we celebrate the World Environment Day today, we are delighted to organize this jointly with Prakriti in partnership with Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I consider it as an honor to welcome this evening Mr. Peter Rimell, resident representative to India, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, has kindly agreed to develop the opening address. He has been of great support to MMA throughout. Mr. Shugato Dutt, IFS, APCCF, Special Forestry and Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority, CAMPA. Dr. N. Krishna Kumar, IFS, retired former PCCF and head of the Tamil Nadu Forest Force Department. Dr. T.D. Babu, acclaimed environmental auditor. Professor Nityananda, Director Council for Social Development, New Delhi. Mr. Deepanka Ghosh, founder and mentor, Prakriti. I take this opportunity to welcome all the invitees from all the organizations who joined in this live evening streaming, guests and members of MMA from all over Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry, and the large number of participants from all over the country who joined us this evening. For the benefit of our guests, we must say that Madras Management Association is one of the leading management associations in the country with more than 8,000 members and has been continuously recognized for being the best management association for many, many years. The last 14 months, actually, post the pandemic, I think MMA is one of the few organizations which has actually adapted to the virtual world in a real nice way, basically. Whether it's been our annual convention, student, general body meetings, everything, and various seminars we have conducted, and many of them have had attendance in the order and viewership in the order of tens of thousands, even more maybe. And thanks to YouTube, the follow-up viewership and many of the programs have been excellent. Actually, we have started new initiatives on virtually, which we are not doing even before. So this online medium is something what MMA is really adapted to very well. Now, coming to the vital theme of this discussion this evening, 2030, the Agenda for Sustainable Development adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people in the planet now and into the future. At the heart of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are an urgent call for action, all countries developed and developing in a global partnership. They recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand while tackling climate changes and working to preserve our oceans and forests. Let us this evening take a pause to understand where we stand today at the world level, at the national level, in meeting the SDG 2030 and which way we are heading. I'm indeed delighted, like all of the delegates, to do more from the galaxy of thought leaders we're going to have this evening. Really looking forward to getting all their perspectives and points of view on this. Thank you for joining us this evening. I thank once again CAS for their continuous support to MMA over the years. I also take this opportunity to welcome past presidents of MMA, my colleagues from the management committee, members of MMA, distinguished invitees, management student members who joined us at MMA, and viewers from all over the globe watching this program live on YouTube, Facebook, and MMA Live webinar. Wish you all a great evening. Thanks, Mr. Vijay Kumar, for putting to this great evening. Welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly, for welcoming formally on behalf of Madras Management Association. I'm also placed on record, as Mr. Molly mentioned, the great support, our partnership with Contractor Shifting for the last so many years. We also have with Mr. Pankaj Madan, the head of training, deputy head of Contractor Shifting from New Delhi, who has also been a great support, and all others who have joined us from CAST today. Very warm welcome to each one of you. And now we'll just move on. Mr. Peter Rimell. Peter Rimell currently is the resident representative of Contractor Shifting India, and after working as a jurist, a judge, and a lecturer, he took public office for public office state ministry, and there he first served as the police and security, later local government department. He was also the principal advisor of the government reforms, German international cooperations, and Ministry of Administrative Reforms, anti-corruption, and also Republic of Indonesia, where he served over 7 years. Then he moved to Rawada, and also as a principal advisor, good governance and justice program. Earlier, he was the resident representative of Lebanon, director of rule of law program, Middle East, North Africa of the Contractor Shifting. And as I mentioned to you, he is presently the resident representative of India, Contractor Shifting. He joined us from Germany. So nice of you. Thank you, Mr. Peter Rimell. This shows clearly your interest in the issues which you are going to be discussing this evening. Over to you, Mr. Peter Rimell, to deliver your introductory remarks. Mr. Peter Rimell.
Thank you, Group Captain. This very august panel, friends, ladies and gentlemen, Vanakkam. First of all, let me express my heartfelt delight to be delivering my opening address on such an important topic organized by our dear partner MMA and the eco-care group Prakruti, which is profoundly engaged with this topic and rich in expertise in the domain. I consider MMA not only one of India's leading management associations, it was just mentioned before that they have won the award for several years to be one of the best management associations, but also as pioneers in generating visionary ideas and concepts on how to efficiently synergize future successful business on the one side with the ethos of sustainability on the other side. We humans are a wondrous bunch. Over the past century, we have made tremendous technological progress, created smart cities, artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, and the list goes on. If we were to really reflect on it, even today's event is a wonder. Despite the pandemic that keeps us physically far apart, we're able to share ideas, thoughts, and opinions effectively and instantly spanning continents. And I'm just doing that because I'm talking to you from Germany. But in our rush to adopt new technologies that make our lives easier, we have often forgotten and neglected their long-term ramifications. Now we are starting to understand the price. Our high carbon resource intensive economic systems are being our pale blue dot inexorably to an irreversible point of global warming. They are destroying nature and biodiversity, undermining the very foundations of our existence, and arguably even contributing to the emergence of COVID-19, though that is still a moot point. They increase inequality as those who have least access to the benefits of human development suffer the most from its undesirable side effects. Today, we face not one, but as many as 3 planetary crises: climate change, loss of nature and biodiversity, and pollution and waste. World Environment Day has been celebrated since 1974. But ladies and gentlemen, we all have to face the criticism that in all these years, not enough has been done to sustainability and to reduce global warming. What all of us, governments, intergovernmental organizations, NGOs, business, members of civil society, and we as individuals must act now towards a more sustainable world for the future generations is crystal clear. Allow me to share the recent experience of my country, Germany, which underlines this absolute need to act now rather than later. Just 2 months ago, in a landmark decision, my country's Federal Constitutional Court, that is like your Supreme Court, our Constitutional Court found that the provisions of our 2019, not too long ago, Federal Climate Act to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 were inadequate and violated the civil liberties of the Basic Law, which provides inter alia for environmental protection for all German citizens. The court stated that it must not be the case that one generation consumes large parts of the CO2 budget and at the same time bears a relatively small share of the reduction effort. If this places a drastic reduction burden on subsequent generations and exposes them to extensive losses of freedom, the court held that the legislature must enact stricter regulations to achieve climate neutrality as early as next year instead of pushing it to a distant future. In doing so, the court has done what it is necessary to protect citizens from the threats to their lives and well-being that climate change is already causing and will continue to cause in even more drastic forms. But as the title of today's virtual conference already implies, instead of only looking back at the mistakes of the past, we need to look at the way forward. This way forward can be described quite simply with a single word: sustainability. Companies all over the world will have to transform their operations towards this goal. On this path, allow me to share the 3 points on how they can achieve this. Firstly, adopting a time-bound plan to make operations as close as possible carbon neutral is inevitable. This means adopting circular models in design and manufacturing and end of product life. It means ending the poisonous trail of pollution in business operations by adopting well-defined and time-bound steps. Secondly, applying same standards to both suppliers and trading partners. A company's internal operations can be sparkling neat and clean, but if it outsources environmental damage, it still remains part of the problem. All this applies just as much to investors, banks, and insurance companies, because we need to focus on sustainability in all our investments. We can no longer afford to have ethical finance on the fringes. And thirdly, to be credible, these processes and commitments must be fully transparent, evaluated by third parties, and based on science. All these steps should be taken in the near future by business worldwide to stop climate change, but beyond that also to remain competitive and survive. Because as the World Economic Forum has already pointed out, climate change poses a massive risk to the profitability of companies. Thus, sustainability indeed is the best interest of all business in all possible respects. As the ecologist Guy McPherson aptly put it, if you really think the environment is less important than the economy, try holding your breath while you count your money. We could do that experience in several Indian cities, I guess. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that we're all on the same page today and well aware of our great responsibility, and that the global environmental crisis will not wait for humanity to return to a new normal. If we don't want to do it for the sake of ourselves, let's do it for the sake of our children and grandchildren. For as Native American proverb says, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So sustainability is not optional anymore, and the clock is ticking. And let me quote Group Captain from the beginning, let's make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter, for setting the context and delivering outstanding opening remarks and setting 3 points formula, which is very, very exciting, interesting, carbon neutral, and set the same standard for the people who are outsourcing, and also most important, to be creditable. Thank you so much for joining from Germany and delivering the opening remarks. And coming to today's evening, as I mentioned to you earlier, we got some outstanding panelists. Thanks to Dipankar, who has also been a great source of support to MMA from Prakriti for putting this together and also getting together the outstanding panelists. Now, as usual, I request all the participants all over who have joined us on different social media portals, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, please share your questions. There's a telephone number which is flashed on your screen. Send it by WhatsApp. We'll collate, and the distinguished panelists readily agreed to address to all your questions And all those who are watching the program on Zoom, please type in the chat box your questions. Be specific to the issue what being discussed this evening, and the distinguished panelists will be delighted. And coming to this evening, the format of the program, just to tell you, we have got, as I mentioned, outstanding panelists. I will introduce all the 4 panelists for this evening briefly, because the detailed distinguished panelist profile has already been shared with you, but it will also be displayed on the screen. And each one of them will speak for a few minutes allotted to them. And thereafter, Mr. Krishna Kumar has kindly agreed to lead the conversation and the panel discussion. After the discussion is over, we will collate the questions which has come from different sources. We'll put it across to the panelists to respond to them. I'll urge upon each one of you, let's make this evening a memorable one, and on the occasion of celebrating the World Environment Day, so that it's very, very important. We have to be very, very few, and as Mr. Peter mentioned, we have to be very creditable to what we are doing this evening. Let's do it together, we can achieve it. Let me have the proud privilege of introducing the distinguished panelists for this evening. Mr. Sugatu Datta, Indian Forest Service, IFS. And Sugatu Datta is CEO of Tamil Nadu Compensatory Forestation Management and Planning Authority. And apart from being the APCCF Social Forestry, he also worked in the government agencies, research and training institutions, national and international NGOs, recipient of several academic distinctions, including East West Center Graduate Degree Fellow and the Best Regional Paper of the Association of Pacific Coast Geographies from the United States of America. He obtained his doctoral degree in Human Geography from University of Hawaii from USA. And as a State Planning Commission, Tamil Nadu, he headed the Land Use Management and was a member of the Secretary of the same. Very, very warm welcome to you, Mr. Sugatu. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Let me have the privilege of introducing our other distinguished panelists for this evening, Mr. N. Krishna Kumar, Indian Forest Service, retired. Krishna Kumar is a former PCCF and head of the Tamil Nadu Forest Department. He served as a director of Institute of Forest Genetics and Tree Breeding at Coimbatore, and also director of the very famous in this part of the country, Mr. Vandalur Zoo. In the post-retirement, is highly esteemed officer. He is the chairman of the Research Council of Kerala Forest Research Institute and member of the Tamil Nadu State Biodiversity Board. And Krishna Kumar is also passionate to influence mindsets of the ecosystem restoration management, and he is recognized in his role as the president of the Tamil Nadu and Kerala chapter of ASCA. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Krishna Kumar. Privileged to have you with us. Then let me have the privilege of introducing Dr. T.D. Babu. Dr. T.D. Babu is an acclaimed environmental auditor. Functionally assesses seafood production without environmental pollution and degradation of Pacific and Asian region. He is also an aquatic animal virologist, and Babu is a trustee of Nirel that work on indigenously tree diversity and conservation. The people from Chennai know Nirel does some beautiful work in Chennai, not to make sure don't cut any trees for any work what you do in Chennai. As a community influencer, Babu founded the Civic Forum Spark that voices the civic concerns of coastal management. Babu's major research contribution are the impact of tsunami, coastal village in Tamil Nadu, and also marine biodiversity conservation and management in India. Let me have the privilege of our last but not least dear friend, Professor Dr. Nityananda, PhD. Dr. Nityananda is a research professional with more than 2 decades of experience in research, consulting, and teaching, and is currently the director at the Council for Social Development New Delhi, a premier research institute working on the issue of social development, more so in sustainable development goal, and MMA and Condor Understanding are doing great to work along with Nityananda in developing a module for sustainable development goal, which will help a large number of NGOs to understand how to take it forward and implement this research, which is a work in progress. We'll be launching it very soon. And previously worked in the National Council for Applied Economic Research. He has over about 220 research publications, and also authored 2 books, edited 4 volumes, written several articles on various newspapers and magazines as well. He received education at Calcutta University and Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Nityananda. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the distinguished panelists. And now I will request Mr. Krishna Kumar to take it forward. And I think in the order, Mr. Sugatu that will do his presentation first. But over to Mr. Krishna Kumar to set the context and take it forward. Mr. Krishna Kumar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vijay Kumar, Group Captain Mr. Vijay Kumar, Mr. Peter Rimell, who set the thoughts for discussion this evening, Dr. Sugatu Dutt, my close friend, Dr. Professor Nityananda, Dr. Babu, Dr. Dayanand, Mr. Dipankar Ghosh, Mr. Venkatraman, and very senior members of the MMA, and people, students who are overall the participants who are watching us this important panel discussion. Something that's really very important for us to ponder today is how do we really be more creative? How do we communicate better? What is the critical thinking required? What is the collaboration that is required if the 5 P's that SDG has been talking of, called the people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership, is to take off? The 4 C's are very pivotal for the 5 P's. And today, when we are talking of COVID and climate, we foresee a lot of threats to the natural ecosystems. And that is how UN has declared this next 10 years, the decade of restoration. The last 10 years was the decade of biodiversity conservation. It becomes very important that yesterday I was addressing a group of scientists. Gone are the days when we used to say that environment is the prerogative only of the Department of Environment, or ecosystem is only the business of the Forest Department, or agriculture is the business of the Agriculture Department. Today, everything requires a transdisciplinary approach. People from all walks of life will have to get into this business of environment. We've been talking about it for almost, I remember, for 3 decades, that there has to be convergence, there has to be networking and collaboration, but this is really not happening. We have 3 excellent speakers, and I would also be putting my thought. And Dr. Sugata Dutt, he was already introduced by Mr. Vijay Kumar, is going to really talk to us about the bioresources, the agricultural economy, how these things, these resources are going to play a pivotal role in the food supply chain, and what is the role of agroforestry for climate change amelioration and also for economic prosperity, biodiversity conservation, and issues like that, which becomes very important. It's also very important that the business interest groups just not only think about their business, but now environment has become a very big business for them, as rightly pointed out by Dr. Peter, that unless in other ways we take care of our environment, business can get into deep trouble. This is what, since morning, since yesterday, we've been talking to various groups, and that's what they all say, that the entire country and the world globally can go into doldrums if we do not check the stability of the 9 process that is going to derail the ecosystem. We all know, friends, that climate change, biodiversity loss, ozone depletion, atmospheric pollution, freshwater use, land use system changes, ocean acidification, release of novel chemicals and biogeochemical flows, particularly phosphorus and nitrogen cycle, and the water cycles, if they are all disrupted, then the earth would come spiraling. So what is it that we really need to think today, debate today, is the question. I'm very sure the panelists will be very focused, and the speakers will also tell us what is there in their mind. I now request Dr. Sugata Dutt to place his view, followed by Dr. Nityananda and Dr. Babu, and then probably I'll place my thoughts, and then we come in for discussions. Thank you.
Dr. Sugata, unmute yourself, please. You're unmute. Shankar, you have to share the screen. Mr. Dutt, thank you.
Yeah. Very good evening, and thank you very much for such a warm introduction. I will just wait a moment to put my slides onto the screen. I'm assuming it's visible. If not, do please let me know.
Not as yet. Shankar, can you take it through, please?
Sir, first of all, we open the share screen, sir. Hello.
Are you doing it?
Yeah, sure. Sir.
I got the share screen, and I.
Sir, you can share blue color screen. Click it, sir.
Got it. Go to the slideshow, sir. Yes. Perfect. Go ahead,
Are we on? I hope both the slides are visible, and I hope I'm also audible. Good evening once again, and I'd like to introduce the concept of the green economy. And the green economy comes in a backdrop of a lot of changes that we are witnessing across the world. I mean, economically, of course, we are about to witness the decline of the oil economy. And we find ourselves also trapped in the midst of a very large pandemic, which threatens the very basic structures of our economic system. Now, the green economy would appear to find a way forward to be able to resolve some of these very desperate problems that we're being faced with. What is a green economy? Well, it depends on resources of biological origin. That is to say, foods, bioproducts, fruits, nuts, roots, bioproducts like paper, oils, tannins, cosmetics, and of course, their consumption and their utility into the bioenergy circuit in the form of biofuels. So it's quite a wide selection. As you can see on the screen, the resources could range from land to water to the oceans, and several byproducts could be coming out of the green economy. Now, I want to place this in the context of our state of Tamil Nadu, which is blessed with a wide range of natural assets. We have, as you can see on the map, a very long mountain chain towards its western boundary, which gives rise to a large number of river systems. And these flow on then to the eastern coastline and generate a wide variety of irrigation resources, ending along the coastline in something like about 10,000 irrigation tanks, which have been in the making since the ancient Chola kingdom. And then Tamil Nadu also seems to be blessed with a culture of tree cultivation. Not only do we have the well-known Palmyra palm, the state tree, but a wide range of other palm products, the coconut being very prominent, but also a huge array of orchards. And into the coastal zone, there is a flourishing fisheries industry. Now, Tamil Nadu also deserves further attention for its economic development. It's been ranked as the second highest among the major states in terms of its per capita GDP, an enviable figure of US dollars 3,900 equivalent. The state itself fetches a revenue of something like 42 billion US dollars annually. And it has a very rich export sector led by the robust IT and ITES, as well as automobiles, industries, small and large, and textiles, and what have you. Not only that, the last several decades have seen the establishment of a wide network of roads, rails, small and large ports, and has resulted in an industrialized, urban, very highly urbanized society. Almost 60% of the state now stands urbanized. But there is quite a number of challenges in the path to the future. Now, despite its blessings, Tamil Nadu has a very low per capita land availability. It is annually hit by either droughts or floods. And surprisingly enough, it has resulted in one of the lowest per capita water availability in the entire country, ranking just behind the desert states of Rajasthan and the arid state of Gujarat. Now, there has been also a decline in the manufacturing sector in Tamil Nadu, particularly so in the small and medium industries. And this is all taking place in the backdrop of a rapid commercial exploitation of its natural resources. So you are witnessing today within the states of Tamil Nadu a decline of its wetlands, attrition of its forest cover, including its mangroves, and an overexploitation of its marine resources. Now, the pandemic seems to have, highlighted our vulnerabilities even further. As we all know, there's been a disruption of employment opportunities, resulting in a lowering of income. There's been a disruption of both intra-state and interstate transport. And overall, this has resulted in a lowering of productivity across the state. But outstandingly, the farm sector appears to be holding. There does not seem to be that perceptible a decline in our agricultural productivity. Now, this brings us to kind of scratch our heads and try to understand what it is that keeps this robust. And one of the things to really look into is the farm to the home supply chain. So we all know the supply chain, and I'm using the words supply chain and management, particularly of the supply chain, because I know I speak primarily to an audience of managers. The supply chain, as you know, procures raw material, processes and manufactures them, packages them, transports them, arranges the logistics of transport and marketing, and ultimately gets into retail and reaches the consumer. In the pandemic, we've seen some threat of the supply of perishable goods being affected. There have been poor prices at the farm gate. But amazingly, a panic buying among the consumers seems to have given rise to a perception of shortages, and that seems to have given a fluctuation in prices. And there has been some degree of rise in prices amidst all the panic. But very, very interestingly, the state machinery seems to have got into the picture and eased the procurement by introducing a system of direct buying from the consumers who have organized themselves into a farmer-producer organizations. Now, the farmer-producer organization linked directly through their primary procurement centers to the consumption centers. As you can see, the infrastructure for the consumer still holds, and there is a very, very wide variety of farm products available to the consumer. I have a picture here of the wide variety of banana crops in the state, and that's only one aspect representative of the wide variety of biodiversity in domestic crops. Now, I'd like to bring this into this discussion, the strategy globally for the conservation of biodiversity. Primarily, I would like to focus on the Aichi biodiversity targets, which was through a convention of biological diversity held in the Japanese city of Nagoya. And one of the biggest highlights there was that the demand for food, for fiber, and for fuel, read biofuels, is one of the largest threats to biodiversity. The rising demand for food, for fiber, for fuel is a threat to biodiversity. So therefore, the Aichi Biodiversity Convention stipulated that agriculture, aquaculture, and forestry be managed in a sustainable manner, so that the opportunities as well as the constraints in this entire project of sustainable development could be addressed. If there were additional resources required, whether they were financial, whether they were technical, or whether they were even human, they were to be accessed, and plans and programs were to be formulated to address these resources. Farmlands, coasts, mountains, and drylands are the variety of ecosystems that we have within which the biodiversity conservation project needs to progress. Now, in Tamil Nadu, as I mentioned earlier, there is a culture of tree cultivation from ancient times, but we have a crisis in terms of the forest area that seems to be retreating with the demand for urbanization, for urban infrastructure, and for all the other associated, demands of the urbanization pressing on its natural resources. So whether it be mangrove forests being threatened by expanding ports, whether it be the mountain forests retreating to give rise to dams, whether it is the expansion of our highways taking over the countryside. The area of Tamil Nadu, which is 130,000 odd square kilometers, holds just 23% of the entire geographical area as recorded forests. Policy dictates that we bring this over to about 33%. 1/3 of our geographical area is desired to be covered with trees. So we have indeed a shortfall of 10% to reach. And by a back of the envelope calculation, we recognize that to achieve that, we would need no less than 32 crore seedlings to be planted in the next 10 years. Now, they cannot all be in the natural ecosystems. They have to fan out into the farmlands. So it's the departments of agriculture, horticulture, sericulture, watersheds development, as well as NGOs and the corporate sector that has to take part in this gigantic effort to expand the tree cover of Tamil Nadu. There is a role for management authorities as well, whether they be from the government sector, from the corporate sector, or from the NGOs. There needs to be an investment in the bio-based economy. Agroforestry models, whether they be based as silvipastoral systems or silvipiscicultural systems, all need to be expanded. In this network of 10,000 tanks that we have in the state, we need to have a parallel system of tree orchards and groves from the whole range of tree biodiversity in the state. We also need to reach out to the coastal zone to include marine resources in our mangrove forests. There is a need to develop for research and development in biofarm, in biofuels, and other biomass-based industries. And indeed, there needs to be an augmentation of the transportation and warehousing infrastructure. Then and only then alone can we get to reach this very desirable goal of bringing this state's geographical area under a wider tree cover. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Sugatu, for this wonderful thought of yours. You have very clearly traced the opportunity for bioeconomy in the country. Bioeconomy itself as a possibility in Tamil Nadu, giving Tamil Nadu as a case study, you had very clearly illustrated the opportunities available, the problems, the prospects. It is very well known that Tamil Nadu has huge gaps, huge potential through tree economy. To boost the green economy, trees can come, both in agroforestry, in farmsteads, in homesteads, even urban forestry. They can all be solutions, is what you've been trying to say. And you said this 30 crore seedlings that needs to be planted in gaps can come through collaboration and cooperation of agriculture, horticulture, NGOs, private partnership. And it's nice that you also trace the role of the management authorities in agroforestry, in coastal development, research, in biofarm and biofuels, so that there is an opportunity for enhanced bioeconomy flow and against the fuel economy. That's what you're trying to say. We definitely have, there is going to be a lot of searching questions to all that you said. We'll wait for it for a while. And let's now listen to Dr. Nityananda. Dr. Nityananda, please. Thank you, Dr. Sugato.
Thank you. And I would like to thank all the three organizing partners, CAS, MMA, and Prakriti for inviting me. You already had a very good presentation on the environmental side, green economy side. So I would rather focus more on the economy and social, touch of environment also side of the presentation. I do not have a big presentation, but I thought a table I have prepared which I could show that will give an idea about how we have not done so well in terms of many indicators, but I will come to that later. If we leave aside last 2-3 years, we have shown very good economic performance, in global standards, in regional standards, in Asian standards. But if we compare that with our performance on the social side, health, education, nutrition, poverty, education, or even environmental performance side, we have not been so good. It has not been commensurate. And of course, certain things are also because not what we have done in the last few years, but historically given. Like we are among the most climate vulnerable countries. And that is not just because of what we have done in the last few years, but it's historically given because of our geography, because of our population pressure, because of our poverty, which has been there, because of our agroclimatic situation that has been prevailing for centuries. Now, that is there. We have always had high inequality, but that has increased over the last couple of decades. And in the last 1 year, that inequality has gone up like anything. You might have noted just a couple of days back, our Niti Aayog brought out a report on sustainable development goals. They have prepared some indices, and have been doing it for the last 3 years. And this year, they have done very interesting thing, they have excluded the economic inequality part from the equality index. So they have looked at social inequality, how SC/ST people are doing, that what women are doing from that context, but not looked at economic inequality. Now, I don't know why they have done it, but probably had they done it, it would have shown much worse outcome than it is showing in the report. Now, this is not a problem with only that part of the report. I mean, I must appreciate that they have done a good job in this pandemic scenario, and they have been able to come out with the report despite all odds. And then there are some indicators that have been used in the report. That's not just this year, but generally, in my view, are not really most appropriate that we could have to get the best real picture of the scenario. Now, be that as it may, we have also been doing pretty badly. There is World Hunger Index, and we all know that we have been doing pretty badly. And in the last 1 year in the pandemic, that has been very worse. We don't have any comprehensive study, but we have enough of anecdotal evidence to say that it has been actually much worse. And we have ignored our education and health for so many years, And the pandemic and the devastation that we're seeing in the pandemic, shortage of oxygen, shortage of hospital beds, shortage of medicines, all are just manifestation of that how badly we ignored the healthcare sector. Now, I hope the current pandemic, the way it has impacted our economy so poorly, will make us think, will make us, realize that ignoring the healthcare was not a good idea. And the kind of economic damage it has caused, we're saying 7%, but that could be, all experts believe that could be a bit underestimated, because we do not know what happened in the informal sector exactly. And our overall report is based on what has happened in the formal sector. And we have seen that formal sector has not been doing so badly. So, share market is doing pretty well. Many companies have booked profits despite huge unemployment and negative growth rate, or it's not growth, it's actually shrinkage of the economy. It is the informal sector and the small and medium enterprises that has suffered, and which is not, the result of that is not yet showing in the data that we have. So that is what healthcare, neglect of healthcare has done it to us. To give just an indication, in India, the number of hospital beds for 10,000 population is just 5. Now, even Pakistan, which people say is a failed state, has 6 beds per 10,000 population. Bangladesh, which used to be much poorer than us, now it seems they have gone above us in terms of per capita income. They have 8 hospital beds, and a country which is slightly above us now, but it was much behind us even 5 years back, 10 years back, Vietnam, which has about 30 hospital beds per 10,000 population. And that is not the end of the story. In India, out of those 5, 3 are in private sector and 2 are in public sector. And if you look at Vietnam, almost all of them are in public sector. And this is no wonder that Vietnam did so fantastically in terms of managing the pandemic. Now, when I say 5 beds, that also gives a kind of misleading picture, because we all know that India has become a destination for health tourism, right? Now, which means out of those 5 beds that we have, many of those beds are being occupied by foreign patients. So to that extent, those beds are not available to Indians. It's a normal situation. The pandemic, foreigners are not coming, that's a different story. But this is a picture that we have in terms of healthcare. And no wonder that India has been the worst hit in terms of economic growth last year. And it is among the worst economic hits, not only globally, but also in Asian region. And we have done worse than all our neighboring countries except Maldives, which is reasonable, which is understandable, because Maldives is dependent on almost entirely on tourism, and tourism has been very badly hit. And of course, we have very, very poor education system. We have among the best schools, but they're all in private sector and only few people can access them. But for poor and middle class people, lower middle class people, the schools we have are very, very poor quality. They're not well maintained. They don't even have proper classrooms, adequate number of classrooms and teachers in, especially in rural areas, and in some areas also in many cities. Now, education and health, they are kind of very important for economic growth. And if you look at the history of economic development, no country in the world has been able to get a middle income status without substantially investing in health and education. And we are still ignoring it. If we get back to the environmental side, what we have seen in the SDG report that has just come out, the report admits that our poverty situation has been pretty bad, which of course everybody knows it is not good. Our hunger situation is bad, which is also not good, everybody knows. But it says our water situation is good, reasonably good. Now, anybody working with environment will tell you that it is not really true. Our access is not good. Our overall water management is not good. And many regions of the country are really water states, states like Punjab, groundwater situation is very poor. And yet the report is saying we're managing pretty well. Then if we talk about energy, the report says it is good. Now the report says, okay, now we have achieved almost universal electricity connection, but connection is one thing and having adequate supply is another thing. Now electricity connection in India is normally used only for lighting, but for cooking needs, many people are still dependent on woods and other biomass, which is not modern fuel. So of course it is not good. So it is, if you take a holistic look, it is not so good. Secondly, even if our access is good, our access is coming for electricity, which is largely coal-based. So it is not sustainable energy that we call, green energy. Okay. Our economic growth, industry, they're saying average, but they're actually not actually average. They're below average. Now, if we look at our climate vulnerability, it is pretty bad, as I said, and agriculture sector is very bad, also because of the water situation. Now our glaciers are receding. Because of that, our water situation is becoming bad to us every year. And we have seen over the last couple of weeks, or probably 3 weeks, that we have seen 2 major cyclones hitting us, both western and eastern coast. And this is something which has increased in both intensity and frequency. Over the last couple of decades, the average number of cyclones that we have been receiving historically has been double, And more interestingly, we always thought that Arabian Sea is relatively peaceful. Bay of Bengal is a problems region. But now that has become a myth. Now we have seen that Arabian Sea is also producing a lot of cyclones. Now, of course, cyclones do a lot of economic damage. It damages crop, it damages infrastructure, it damages human settlements. So it is not just environmental, it is hugely economic also. And the kind of damage one cyclone causes, to repair that, we spend huge money, and it takes time also. And we have seen that the temperature in sea level, there are environmental experts here, they will testify, temperature level at seawater has increased, and that might have been responsible for, what you say, the increased frequency of cyclone. Let me just try to show you my slide.
Another 2 minutes, Dr. Nityananda.
Yeah, I'll just show the slide and I will not take much. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. If you look social progress index, India is 117 out of 163 countries, and many other South Asian countries are doing better than us. Maldives, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, they're doing better than us. So who are not doing better than us is Pakistan and Afghanistan. Okay. Now let's do environmental performance index. There also, India is pretty bad. 168 out of 180 countries. And who in this region is doing worse than us? It is only Afghanistan. All other countries are doing better than us. Climate change, this is a reverse index, negative index. So if you have higher, low number, meaning if you are 1, you are very vulnerable. So you see, India is very vulnerable. Now, you might wonder that, Maldives is facing existential crisis. Maldives might vanish because of climate change, but their vulnerability is lower than us. It's because the kind of adaptive capability people have. Ours are poor people. They are highly dependent on agriculture, which is very vulnerable, which is dependent on rainfall and climate. So that's why Indian people are very vulnerable. So only country in the region who are more vulnerable than us is again Afghanistan. Now commitment to reduce inequality, that's where we are also faltering. It is not just we are unequal, but we are not showing much commitment to remove that inequality. Now, that commitment comes through different means, how good healthcare you have, how good, education you have. You all know that because of healthcare, many people go down below the poverty line. This year, many people will go out of below poverty line. Many people have lost jobs. Unemployment level is at all-time high in India now, and because of that, many people will go below poverty line, and all these will go to increase inequality further. And we have not seen much of commitment. I mean, just to give one example, which is very, very important, that if you would not invest in education, if you would not give access to education to underprivileged people, they will never be able to be mobile upward. So that means you are not helping those people to get out of poverty and reduce the inequality gap. So despite in the last column, you see economic growth being relatively high in India compared to other countries, we have faltered on most of the environmental and social indicators. Now, of course, post-pandemic, what we have to do is that we have to focus on agriculture, climate adaptability, in terms of water efficiency, in terms of making agriculture green, in terms of making agriculture profitable, not just market reforms, but you need reforms in, I'm not saying what market reforms have been introduced are all good, but there are problems. Energy, as I said, access to energy, and just because you have adequate supply of energy is not necessarily good. We have to think about long-term sustainable energy. Health and education, access to education and health is most important. And the pandemic has shown that we have to have much better public healthcare facilities. The government has to invest much more on health. Private will not be able to take care of vast number of poor people who need healthcare. Climate adaptation, I said, and mitigation also, in terms of forest, my co-speakers have talked about carbon sinks, and going for more renewable energy would be good to get into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Nityanand. It was an eye-opener. We thought we were all, many of us, the common man thinks that sustainable development goals, all the 17 goals, the 169 targets, and the 250 indicators, they probably, at least Niti Aayog was telling that we are very much in the forefront. We are one of the countries that are doing very well. Even day before yesterday, the Hindu carried a very interesting article in the front page itself saying that many states are doing well as far as SDGs are concerned. And somehow each state has got its own parameter of judging it, and they are doing well. But of course, things would have been okay, but for this pandemic, which has derailed a lot of things that we didn't really expect things to go bad. But I do agree that long-term planning in terms of education, health, agriculture, climate and energy, these are very important for the country to look at during the pandemic and post-pandemic. One thing that is really confronting the country is employment, the youth force that we have, a huge, more than 50% of our youth. What are we really going to do? And the way the employment is falling, education itself is in jeopardy because people do not know what to do with the online system of education, the uncertainty in examinations and things like that. So there's a lot of stress among the students. So all that is there. But then all this, if it could be viewed as a pandemic scenario, and how do we really come out of it? You have made some very good pointers on that we are doing very well as far as economy, we are okay. But when it comes to social environment, we are not all right. But for friends, we should know the Sustainable Development Goal 1 to 6 is on social parameters. Sustainable Goal 7 to 11 is on economic. And 12 to 15, you all know, is on environmental goals. And in all these goals, Government of India is very sure of achieving all these goals by 2030. And that's why all the planning departments are trying to push this through various programs of the state, various programs of the government. They're also requesting NGOs and others to come in, CSR, public funding, crowdfunding. They're looking for all opportunities to see that sustainable development goals are achieved in all ways possible. This also takes me to the thought that last decade, 2011-2020 was a decade of biodiversity. Many of the biodiversity goals and parameters fixed ought to have been achieved by 2020. Then probably from what Professor says, we may have to even go back and look at what are the biodiversity goals that we've really achieved or what are the ones that need to be achieved. So from what Professor says, he says there is a caution. At this rate of speed, probably will not be able to achieve things by 2030 unless in other ways, all of us step in to do things. Thank you, Professor. That was very enlightening. I'll now request Dr. Babu to come and give his thoughts on auditing and what responsible auditing can do to set right things. Dr. Babu. Is Dr. Babu around?
Yeah, he's sharing the screen, yes.
Yeah.
Shake. Yeah, got it now.
So I would start with a quote from Thiruvalluvar Thirukural. Pagutundu Palluir Ombudal Nulor Toguttavatrul Ellam Talai. I explained the highest of all the virtues which authors have summed up is the partaking of food that has been shared with others and preservation of manifold life of other creatures. So it has been insisted 2000 years before itself the importance of the biodiversity and supporting it for the welfare of mankind itself. And we have been for last decade, we have been talking about sustainability and we have been promoting sustainable projects, sustainable activities to safeguard our ecosystems and the environment and the livelihood. But have we really understood what the habitat is, the ecosystem is? It's not just the knowledge is confined within the experts and the passionate peoples, but it should go and reach to the mass and to the public. Unless there is a people's participation, we will not be able to achieve the goal 2030 and even beyond that. So it is very, very important that we make the common people, the public, to realize the importance of ecosystem and habitat. We all think the earth is owned by human beings. No, even it is for all the living beings, which starts from ultra small bacteria, which is 0.00 cubic micron, which is invisible to our common eyes. And for example, it can such microbes can accommodate like 150,000 of such microbes can accommodate in just the cut edge of a single strand of human hair. So you can think even a small micro granule of a sand is an habitat for some living creatures, and up to the largest animals we all know about the blue whales. And it's not just the geographical area is considered as a habitat, but even a leaf litter, a bark, a dead log can be a habitat. So while handling such materials also, we should be very cautious and think that we should be cautious about the biodiversity or the living community striving for all these habitats. And I'm just going to show some slides which with reference to the our city. I'm going to talk about our city Chennai, and we see what are the things we have executed in the name of sustainable development and safe habitat for the human beings, and are really have we understood, and we have been created a good safe habitat for everyone, and we have to review it and we have to assess, and we would like to know how these natural, if you see this urbanization, these on the right hand side you can see an array of housing units built by the government, and these are the alternate housing units for the people who have been encroached in the river banks, but they have been asked to shift to a safer areas like this. This is a Perumbakam area in Chennai. Are we really shifting the problem from one place to another and safeguarding one habitat and destroying the other natural ecosystem? That we have to assess. Actually, this really many times we realize the importance of the ecosystem only through disasters. That is very unfortunate. And at the same time, we are also very unfortunate that human being has very short memory loss. So we talk many things about correcting the actions at that time of the disaster, but once it comes to the normalcy, we go back and continue doing the same mistakes. And I think you can see the other one, the private building units is being constructed on the floodplains. So we are not able to understand the different kind of ecosystem, the catchment areas or the mountains or floodplains, and these are all human uninhabitable areas. But we are not at all demarcating all these things, and we are making our human community, human race itself into subjecting to them into subjecting to the hazard, safety hazard, and also destroying the natural ecosystem. And we can see, we all say that we have to, in the first slide, Dr. Sugato was talking about low per capita of water availability. Though we have water bodies and water resource, but we are not able to harvest because we have been destroying the water bodies. This is in the Pallavaram. We can see we have been closing the water, the huge freshwater lake, and in the Kodingiyur, you can see the slide where a large lake is being landfilled, and we talk about flooding. So all natural phenomena, the cyclones, rains, or any for that matter, is being converted into a human man-made disasters. Instead of these rains and cyclones may not have that much adverse impact as if we had not been doing all these mistakes. And again, the coastal ecosystem, common man may not be knowing what is the sand dunes. And sand dunes is the first line defense ecosystems in the coastal stretch. And India being a peninsular country, and it is surrounded by three sides, both the sides with the on eastern side, the Bay of Bengal, western side in Arabian Sea, and the down south in Indian Ocean. We have long stretches of sand dunes of different heights, up to 60 feet to 12 feet things. This one is just in ECR, and I don't know how many of us have been noticed a sand dune in a Besanagar or in Uttandi, but these are being flattened, and it is being converted into a habitat, a human habitat. But we we fail to understand that we are putting ourselves into a big safety hazard. And during 2004, you would have realized that wherever there was a sand dunes were intact, the villages behind the sand dunes were safe and they didn't have any casualties. Whereas just few meters away, where the sand dunes were being flattened and there was been a colonization of human settlements, there was a lot of casualties. But still, we amend CRZ rules from 1,000 meters to 500, and now it is gone to 200 meters. So we are just approaching and exposing ourselves and destroying the ecosystem and the habitat of the coastal flora and fauna. And you can see here, in the previous slide, we saw that we developed housing units in the water flood areas, floodplains, and to mitigate that, instead of correcting our actions, we add more problems to it. See this on the right-hand side top, it is on the beach. A stormwater drain is being constructed and destroying that is a fragile coastal sandy beach, and we are trying to flood the water or pump the water from the floodplains into the ocean through this stormwater drain, creating more disasters to the coastal communities. Communities refer here as all living communities, not just the human beings. And see in the right hand side bottom, this coast has been used as a dump, and we should know, we should have a proper regulations and monitoring and assessment, regular assessment of land use pattern of different ecosystems, and which are ecologically sensitive. And this stormwater drain uh, is is on coastal regulation zone on scheduled thing of A1, which is the ecologically sensitive area, because olive ridley turtles nestle along these stretches. So we are destroying the nestling ground of the olive turtle also. So beach users are ignorant about this kind of classifications. They doesn't know about what is CRZ A1. So we need to label it or display panels in particular appropriately. Like in forest department, we have been putting, there have been boards called indicating that it is a reserve forest. Like that, all habitats should be demarcated precisely, and it should be displayed properly, so that even a common public is aware of what he is doing and what he should not do at what ecosystems. And you can see this is a natural resource, and again it's an habitat, a mountain, a rocky mountain, and it helps in serves as a catchment area around the hill. And it's a Melur, actually it's a Melur area where the the village is fully dependent on the agriculture. But because of this quarry uh, and indiscriminate over exploitation of the granites, we are eliminating the habitat. At the same time, we are destroying the associated ecosystems and the livelihood of the local. And despite of this, are we using it very judiciously, this kind of resources? That is a big question mark. You can see on the right hand side, these are the granite slabs which are being used to put a pavement in the under a smart city program in Chennai. Within 2 years, it has been dismantled and new pavements have been put, and these stones are not reused, and it is dumped in a water body. So how are we really assessing or auditing such kind of this will happen only if you involve the public audit. And the committee should be at ward level, and all ecosystems should be managed micro level. And at micro level, the local public, the stakeholders has to be part of the committee because they understand, they know the traditional knowledge about that geographical area and the bioresources. So I think that dislink or disconnect is being seen in this such execution of these projects. And
Doctor,
again, coming to rivers.
2 minutes, 3 minutes, Doctor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And there is a good hope that CRRT, the Chennai River Restoration Trust, is able to do a significant work in reviving the rivers. Rivers are umbilical cords which connects the ocean, land and the ocean, and it transforms the nutrients to the oceans so that the productivity is involved, is enhanced. But now it is all disconnected, and mangroves are being restored in certain pockets. But we have lots of degraded mangrove ecosystems even in Kovalam and Ennur. We have to revive all those things to enhance our fisheries resources as well as the land resources. And dumping of these waste management has also to be taken it very seriously. Anyway, now there is some a startup of solid waste management, and even political people have started including environment issues as in their manifestos. But unless we have people understand what is actual the ecosystem is, and it has to be executed with the interdisciplinary people. It's not just the ecologists, it's not just the PW engineers, but it also includes all the fields, integrated fields. Here you can see Prosophis juliflora is just overgrowing the pandanus in a coastal stretch. So that is also invasive. That is other exotic species also makes adverse impact, which needs to be audited and assessed, and it has to be removed. And this again, sewage and city is developing, and we have 586 MLT per day it's been generated, but we have only 481 MLD capacity of treatment plants. But now I think 986 MLD plant is being planned. But we need to decentralize even the sewage treatment plants. We cannot have a huge ones in one place and destroying that ecosystems. So it is very better to have good management of the habitats and the ecosystem only when we decentralize and do micromanagements. And this is another thing where Chennai Nagar, there was 300 trees spread across 8.8 acres in Chennai Nagar, a park. It was being converted into a metro rail to increase the public transport connectivity. But you can see the 4 circles. Now we have 4,800 trees. But see the surface area. Will it act as an efficient carbon sink as it was with the 300 trees? So it is directly proportionate to the surface area of the greenery. Now the Miyawaki has been taken over and promoted, which is not going to help us in carbon sequestrations in cities like ours. And again, afforestation or planting in city, many numbers we talk about. Sugato Datto said 32 crores has to be planted, but many millions have been planted in the last decades. But because of the non-strategic methods adapted a wrong season and just planting, and there is no post carrying of species, wrong species at wrong locations has gone has made the greening enhancement project a failure. And restoration should be very sensitive, and you cannot convert a pond ecosystem into a concrete tank. It is not at all an ecosystem. So we have to rethink. It's not just, that's what I'm again insisting, it's not just the engineer's work. It is, we need many things. So transformation from eco events to eco lifestyle should be the inevitable or takeaway message for the sustainable, to attain sustainable goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's join together and jump into action to convert a sustainable movement and change to protect our ecosystem, the earth, and our neighborhood in specific. Thank you.
Dr. Babu, that was excellent. You had really told us that any amount of acts, policies, legislations will not help, but it is probably the proper planning, integration of ideas, and the partnerships that are very important. You've also underlined the need for balancing ecology and economy. That becomes very pivotal in the days to come if we are to achieve all our goals. You very clearly took Chennai as an illustrative point, try to trace the ecosystems in Chennai that are under various stages of degradation because of our intervention, our unthoughtful actions, which have led to a lot of disruptions, and for which probably we need to also spend money to get it back. So we fully appreciate your concern, which is probably the public concern also, as to how bioresources are not being handled with sensitivity. And you took local illustrations of Shenoy Nagar on urban planting, on metro planting, and then showed us what are the things that probably prudence requires so that we balance ecology and economy much better. Thank you for that. And now, with the permission of the members, I'll quickly run through my thoughts for the next 10 minutes. It's not a PowerPoint presentation. It's just going to be a free talk. Friends, today is World Environment Day.
Sorry, Mr. Krishna Kumar, to intervene. Now we have a really overshot. We have over 1,050 participants. We have got a number of questions. May I request the panelists to keep brief the presentation, and we move on to the Q&A session, which is very, very important. Thank you, Mr. Krishna Kumar, for your understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead with your presentation, sir.
Yeah. Doctor, can I go ahead?
Yeah, please go ahead briefly, because we have over 1,050 participants, a number of questions. We'll try and accommodate as many questions as possible from the participants.
The next decade, the decade of ecosystem restoration. We know that the next 10 years, it is the responsibility of all of us to see how best the degraded ecosystems are taken forward, so that the goods and services from these ecosystems, when you talk of ecosystem, the pond, the oceans, the rivers, the coastal areas, the forest, the mountain, all these are ecosystems where probably the human being, the microorganisms, all of us have to live in harmony. And therefore, what we probably need to do is, how do we really handhold and look at ecosystem restoration in the next 10 years? It is just not the prerogative of the forest department alone or the agriculture department, where farmlands also have to be restored. All of us probably will have to come on a transdisciplinary approach. So what is ecosystem restoration? Is only trying to assist the recovery of various ecosystems that I was telling you through intervention. There can be passive eco-restoration or there can be active restoration. But what we need to do is, the Society for Ecological Restoration says that with the intention of human being, the intentional activity for restoration becomes very important, so that we are able to rebuild the ecosystem, and which otherwise the ecosystem, which is very resilient, can bounce back in terms of its health, its integrity, its composition, its structure, function. Ecosystem conservation or restoration is very important because of the goods and services, the employment opportunity, the agriculture potential, the water, the air purification. All these roles are very well known. How do we really restore ecosystem? There are quite a lot of technologies. There are a lot of resources available, and GIS, GPS, all those technologies are available. What is really required is the fertilization of thoughts. The cross-section of people will have to come through into this restoration process. So next 10 years, this has to become a people's movement, because we need to provide solutions for nature. Nature also are solutions for us, but it has to be a two-way channel to see how best restoration can be carried forward. Only then probably our sustainable development goal by 2030 can be achieved. Only then can all the other things. See, they say the bond challenge, 350 million hectares, the size of India is degraded world over, and India has committed to restoring many of the degraded ecosystems. So I'm trying to look at a sustainable landscape level approach where all of us will have to partnership. We're looking for CSR support. We're looking for quite a lot. Everybody has to take ecological restoration as their responsibility. The business houses, the citizens forum, all will have to come forward to see. And I think the government of India, the government of all the state governments are also seized the matter. We are identifying all the systems that require restoration and with the people's participation. See, the difference between restoration so far, whatever we did in the last 40 years or 50 years, have been very patchy. We have been doing restoration for a single species to fill up certain gaps, plant mountains, or trying to bring back biodiversity, etc. But today, ecosystem restoration has to be looked at for many things. Climate change, number one, for the goods and services to be given, and for livelihood, the security, for security of our life system, and for biodiversity conservation. I think there are quite an ecosystem restoration is the thing that our students will have to take into understanding. If our biodiversity, if all our sociology, the economics that we are talking of has to sustain, then probably eco-restoration has to be the most important thing. And we all need to do together collectively. This probably requires a little more of a talk, but I leave it here and I'll take questions and answer on ecosystem restoration. Every little system in our state and the nation as a whole has to be looked at, and there are funds that are available. So all that we need is a mindset change and to see how best these systems can be restored. Since Mr. Vijaykumar has told me that we need to take a lot of questions and people are enthusiastically waiting, I leave it here and open up this opportunity as ecosystem restoration for the next 10 years as a very good opportunity for our country to get back to natural business so that our natural capital is protected through social actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Krishna Kumar. As I mentioned to you earlier, we have over 1,050 participants watching this program. I am flooded with a lot of questions that clearly indicate the interest in the people on this topic which are being discussed this evening. And before I move on to the questions from the chat box as well as from the social media, we have our partner from German, Mr. Peter Rimell. He's got a question to Mr. Sugato Datta, as well as you got also your viewpoint. May I request Peter Rimell, please address your question to Mr. Sugato Datta, please.
Yes, I would have a question for him and a suggestion for MMA. Now, the question would be, Mr. Dutt, in your presentation, of course, you presented a tree cultivation issue in Tamil Nadu, all the figures you gave, and the gigantic task. Is this figures of your organization, or has the government or anyone recognized that this needs to be changed into a program? Is it so far only prediction, or is already the issue addressed? That's my question for you. The suggestion for MMA would be, now it was mentioned it's a gigantic program, gigantic needs. So maybe MMA could adopt a part of this gigantic program and use all its members and maybe generate in a kind of crowdfunding of its members, CSR funds, for example, to put them together and make a bigger footprint on part of that program. So that's a suggestion only for that sample. Could be something else, but the idea of joining it and having a larger positive footprint is behind it.
Thank you, Peter. What you, Sugato, for your response, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rimell, for that question. Yes, this is part of an organized effort taking place in our planning units, which is, of course, the State Planning Commission, as well as the Department of Forests. It is in response to a policy declaration to enhance the tree cover, not necessarily only in the reserve forest, but the tree cover in the entire state. And the calculations that we have done are based on a certain spacing that we normally adapt for a particular ecosystem. And we realized that this task is to be achieved over a wide range of land ownership categories. So we recognize a lot of this planting needs to be done either in linear form, in roads or railway tracks. And some of this will be over more rectangular spaces. A lot of this would happen perhaps as recreational lands. but the vast majority will indeed take place in farmlands in the form of agroforestry projects. There is a very limited scope of expanding the state-owned forests. It's very, very limited. And the task before us is particularly daunting because within this state, given the pace of urbanization, there's very little land left behind for this particular kind of use. Much of the land is getting diverted for infrastructure and more pertinently for housing. So these are the two rather sectors which are claiming a lot of land within the state. So the projection was made primarily on the basis of prescribed spacing that we adopt for regular forestry operations. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And we have a number of questions. I will try and go through as many of them as possible to try and accommodate within the next 15-20 minutes available with us. This is the first question again to you, to Mr. Datta. It's a question addressed to you from Mr. Ramalingam from Pondicherry. He says, sir, you mentioned that 33% of the is the target of the Tamil Nadu government for the forest cover in the area of Tamil Nadu. Then how do you plan to achieve when we have an ambitious political system in place for urbanization, road building and infrastructure? So how do you manage it as a government official, balance it between the government ambition and the nature's requirement of forestations? What's your initiative on this line as a government official heading the forest department of government of Tamil Nadu?
Like everything in this country, every development effort, the answer lies in not monopolizing the activity by the state authority. So this has to be a work achieved in tandem with or in close partnership with a variety of institutions. The private sector, the corporate sector needs to come in if it recognizes tree cultivation or tree resources as feeding into the bioeconomy. The tree resources, whether they are leaves, fruits, barks, or even the timber, could address the needs of a wide variety of industries, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, health, food. There is indeed a huge range. There's also ethanol, which is being sourced from woody material. But ethanol is a dicey subject to get into, but that's a larger economy that is going to emerge with the decline of oil, with the decline of petroleum. So like I said, it's a multi-sectoral approach that needs to be adopted. And we can do it only if all sectors participate together. So it needs to come into a mission mode where there is a cooperative effort by all concerned, but spearheaded perhaps by the state. So that's the approach I would take.
Thank you, sir. Here's a question from Mr. Viswanathan from the chat box. I'll try and combine as many questions as possible. Mr. Viswanathan wants to know that he's a member of MMA. Are we really making progress in use of ethanol blended petrol? Should we pursue this more vigorously? And Mr. Ghosh also wants to know, are there any regulation that can stop filling up the fresh water bodies, especially since there is so much of shortage of water and it's really impacted during the last floods Chennai. So how do you going to address these issues? Maybe Mr. Babu would like to take on this question, or anybody else? Mr. Krishna Kumar, you suggest?
Actually, in Kerala, they have enforcement. They penalize the person who landfills a water body, but it is not being done here in Tamil Nadu. But regarding laws, I think Krishna Kumar sir can add.
Okay. Yeah, you need more regulation, stringent action. I think that's the order of the day. That's why.
Could I supplement? I think yes, there is very quickly. I mean, I think there is a phenomenal demand for being more rigorous in terms of regulatory action. But the fact of the matter is that the competition for land as a resource is extremely strong, not just within this state, but several other parts of the country. The land is a scarce resource, and people would do anything to acquire more land and put it into what they perceive as productive use. Now, the issue is not everyone is convinced tree planting is a productive use because of the long gestation period for trees to mature into a usufruct or a useful product, either timber or anything else. So that's the disincentive for putting land under tree cover. But if we could get into a mode of management where we could incentivize planting of trees, either trees in combination with other crops, which is the agroforestry model, or trees that have already been linked to the variety of industries for taking part in their resource needs. So there would need to be a widespread rationale for adopting the program of planting trees. You do plant trees for the love of planting them. You do plant trees for the sake of the environment. It is a living resource, but not everyone is convinced that it's a useful economic activity. So there needs to be a combination of regulatory approaches as well as incentivization through economic packages.
Thank you, Mr. That's a great insight. Now we have a question from Brigadier Devdas. What do you want to know is more of observation. So more violations are encouraged by law enforcing agencies. All that need is a stringent law and the punishment of the defaulters. Judiciary and Supreme Court once all India ban on felling the trees, something that should start immediately. And also Mr. Ayush also added that even if we enforce many laws or passing the acts to save the environment is ultimately falls in the hands of us, the public. We must know that we must just a borrower of these resources, not the masters. I think that's one of the reasons this event being held today. And maybe anybody would like to add a comment to this observation, what is made by two gentlemen. Krishna Kumar, you have to unmute yourself, please.
The second question or the answer lies in the second person's thought. That's very correct. Because India is a country which has maximum environmental laws, forest laws, or name it and you have all the laws and acts. What is really required is also the accountability and responsibility. All of us have to be watchdogs, sentinels. We have to see that our resources are well protected. Just don't leave it to government agency. Today, of course, the government agency is also very transparent. They are also trying, they know that the social media is very active. So nowhere big crimes can happen. If you all together put things in a very positive perspective and tell the government that, yes, we need to work together, a lot of good things can happen is what we feel, having worked with the system for almost 4 decades.
Thank you, sir. And there is a question addressed by Mr. Ram Kumar from Bangalore to Mr. Nityanand. Sir, in your presentation, you mentioned the Niti Aayog report not looked at really the economic equality while assessing the SDG score. It's improved by 6. And do you think has it anyway impacted the sustainable development goal and the ranking of the states in terms of the sustainable development goal achievement? Do you think it's an indicator that we are doing extremely well, or it's another annual report which just passed through for the benefit of everybody that we are also doing very well? Because why this question has come from him is from your presentation, we could see the healthcare number of areas we are way behind other countries, and so where do we stand? It's very, very we are all very worried. And what is the way forward, and how do you really impress upon the people and the government to really look at sustainable development goal as a serious issue? What do you think is one quick solution for this issue? Dr. Nityananda, you have to unmute yourself.
Niti Aayog has its own limitation. It's a government body, so it would be very careful in criticizing government policy or achievements. So given that scenario, I would not say that Niti Aayog has not done a good job. They have done a good job, but there are areas where you have to be more careful. See, if you are saying that poverty situation is very bad, which the report admits, if you are saying hunger situation is very bad, then how can inequality could be good? If you do not have inequality, then you cannot have poverty and you cannot have hunger, right? So it shows some contradiction, right? So similarly, if I give similar examples, like, One is that you have goals, you have targets, and then you take indicators on measuring those goals. Now, those indicators are decided nationally, and even international indicators, there are no agreement on what would be the best way to measure those targets. Now, there we have the problem. So we try to look at things where data is easily available, and because we look at things which are data is easily available, we often do not even measure which are the difficult areas. For example, if you have seen that SDG 12, sustainable consumption and production, the report says we have done pretty well. Is it so? We all know that it's not, in most cities, waste are not managed well. Hazardous waste get mixed up with normal waste. Our recycling rate could be good, but that is only one part of the area. So food waste, we have relatively less compared to many developed countries because of our situation, our culture. But if you look at one aspect of waste management, it is very, very bad. So it depends, and since we do not have adequate data, we tend to ignore those aspects actually where we might get, poorer, scores.
Thank you, sir. And to Viswanathan's query on ethanol, I think, which has also Mr. Nityananda has given a brief thing on why ethanol thing. It says ethanol blending target could not be achieved due to the inadequate supply of ethanol. It is produced from the sugar waste. Now there are plans for producing ethanol from other waste, sugar, and possibly the crop itself. Let's see how we can progress. Let's hope for the best. And we also have a question from Mr. Dayanandan. Dayanandan wants to know, equality is a part of the promise of a democratic country. We are still struggling with the issues of equality in poverty, education, employment, and housing. All people have the right to ask for every consumer goods or luxury item that is available for someone else. How are we factoring this in our goals and planning? Who would like to take this question, sir? Mr. Kumar? This is more socio-economic question.
Yeah, I should put it up in Nityananda. I think Professor Nityananda should answer this.
Yeah, sustainable development goal. Nityananda would like to take on this very, very briefly. We've got another 5 minutes. We'll try and accommodate.
Which one?
This is a question from Dayanandan. You want to know that the luxury goods are everybody should have the what rich man enjoys, poor man should also enjoy. Under these conditions, how do you manage the equality? How are we factoring these issues in our goals and planning? I don't think. Do you have an answer for this?
See, we are not talking about which luxury goods should be available to everyone. That's not how we try to look at it now. Inequality. We admit that inequality will be there. Now, is it acceptable? Is it leading to some people not getting the basic requirement like food, clothing, shelter? Second thing is that we have some level of inequality already there. Is it going up further or it is coming down? So the SDG target is not about removing inequality altogether. It's about reducing inequality. The problem is that instead of reducing it, we are increasing it. That's where the problem is.
I think worth remembering Mahatma Gandhi here. Earth provides enough to satisfy everybody's need, but not greed.
Exactly.
So probably take it into your heart. I think a lot of Dr. Dayanand's questions can be answered. Over-consumerism, over-consumption. Now, this is what everybody says. How do we really balance ecology and economy? That's probably the take-home message. Instead, all of us trying to really rush towards mad economic development is what has happened in the last 4 decades. Now it's time that we bring back ecology into economic development. Then probably sanity comes in. I think this is what message has to go. Mr. Vijay Kumar.
Thank you, sir. We have got a number of questions. We almost come to the end of the time, but in view of the importance of the topic, as a special case, we'll extend by another 5-10 minutes to accommodate a couple of more questions with the permission of the panelists. I hope it's quite okay with you. Here is a question from Mr. Ramadurai from Chennai that he wants to know, how can the post-2020 global framework for biodiversity that will be developed under the CD in follow-up of the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020 be more effectively linked to the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and its implementation? Maybe Nityananda, you would like to answer this? No, it's not there in the chat box. It's come from YouTube, actually. You want me to repeat the question?
It was in chat box,
No, it's not in the chat. It's come from YouTube.
Okay.
What he wants to know, he says, how can the post-2020 global framework for biodiversity that will be developed under the CD in follow-up of the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011-2020 be more effectively linked to the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and its implementation? Do you think any way it can be done?
Well, if you look at some of the SDGs, you have SDG, SDG 15, SDG 14, these are very much biodiversity goals. So obviously it's already there. And now the question is that, are we, going to meet the target? For example, we have a target of 10% marine protected areas. I don't see, which is important for protecting marine biodiversity. Now, I don't see any, possibility of reaching that because we're not even 3%, I guess, as of now. So how will you go that far from that? And we don't have a specific plan for that. Secondly, if you look at existing biodiversity, India is still good compared to many other parts of the world, but we're losing very fast. And when we talk about biodiversity, it is not only about forest biodiversity, but also about agricultural biodiversity, where we have lost hugely over the last 5 decades. Now, if we are not going to take adequate protection, so we have to look at the biodiversity, not only for the country as a whole, but for each of the agroclimatic zones. What we are doing to each of those climatic zones. Maybe in places where you don't have huge population, maybe in Himalayan region, you might have biodiversity, but maybe in plains, you will be losing further. So you need all those micro planning also for protective. SDG has permission for it. The problem is that SDGs are very often, the way the goals have been defined, the way targets have been defined, are often not very pinpointed. They are often a bit vague, and it is done purposefully because, it has been defined for all countries, 200 odd countries, so that all countries can, kind of customize according to their need. Now it depends on how well we customize those goals and targets according to our situation.
Thank you.
That's where it will lie. Thank you.
Great, sir. And we have again a question from Satyanarayana from Hyderabad. What do you want to say? How can digital innovations, processes or concepts be used for sustainable businesses? And how can digital change in companies be made sustainable? Why not bring digitalization and sustainable development goal together and start the future sustainability and resiliency with modern technology? This way we could achieve better results. Your views, sir? Anybody would like to take this? Maybe again, Nityananda.
So this is, I think we are giving a bit excessive importance to digital technology in terms of, making economy more sustainable. Much of the production of different goods, digital technology can help only to some extent. But when you produce food, if you want to say, for example, improve water efficiency, if you want to improve, use less of chemical and more of biofertilizers, I'm not sure how digital technology will help. You have to have a proper incentive system. For example, the current incentive system is too much biased in favor of chemical fertilizer, chemical pesticide rather than biopesticide and biofertilizer. So unless we change that, digital technology will not help. our whole incentive system for agriculture is not geared towards, making agriculture more water efficient. So how, your energy policy, your, pricing policy, MSP policy, if those are not, it's a very politically very complex subject. So if you don't factor in those, how will digital technology help that? Digital technology might be helping to some extent, like what we are doing today. We are, instead of I coming down to Chennai and, burning petrol and aviation turbine fuel, I'm saving my time also, and, that can be done to some extent. So in service sector, maybe it will be more useful. But when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to mining, it's much more difficult. And of course, I was talking about SDG 12, resource efficiency, which will be very important, but which would need lot of innovation, lot of R&D in terms of using, improving material efficiency, resource efficiency. Thankfully, we have got a resource efficiency draft policy, which is not yet adopted, but government is working in that. But it's adopting a policy is one thing, but implementing it with appropriate different measures, schemes, it will take a lot of time. Yes. All those will require, because people will need goods, people will need services. Digital will help only to some extent, not replace everything.
Yeah, got it. Thank you, sir. Here's a question from Mr. Kumar from Coimbatore. I'll take another 2 more questions finally, so that we'll end up well before 8 o'clock. What he wants to know is, against the backdrop of rising, these are a question addressed to Mr. Sugato that, and what he wants to know is, against the backdrop of rising consumption demand for food, depleting natural resources and global warming induced climate change, what is the consumer can do to induce ecological sustainable consumption? So what your advice, please?
I'm sort of inclined to say the market dictates what you do, and the market again serves to the kind of needs that you create for yourself. So a consumer only consumes what's offered to him. And right now, I think I think we're driven by a macroeconomy that is where I suppose oil, widespread transportation is the dominant ethos. And when that begins to change, I think our markets themselves will readapt and change and reorient, and thereby our consumer demands would change. So I really think we are trapped in a current system which only wants a mega economy to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think somewhere the answer lies in scaling that down. That's the I suppose philosophical answer that I can give. Other than that, I really don't know if I have an answer.
Thank you, sir. I think yes, the typical of the government heads answer, because we don't have an answer to this. People have to manage it. Here is my final question. It has come from Rajiv Mittal, and what do you want to know is, what do you think are the main challenges in order to obtain the fast and dramatic reduction in greenhouse gas emission in your municipality community? How does the municipality greenhouse gas emission affect and influence the social and economic conditions, job opportunities, businesses, education in your community? What should be the endeavor of the government and the other organizations like NGO, which Mr. Babu belongs to, action in these regards? Hey, Mr. Babu, would you like to take on this? Anybody else? Mr. Krishna Kumar? Dr. Krishna Kumar? Dipankar, you would like to add, because you are a Mr. Dipankar? All about greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. There's a question which is quite a issue. Then we'll pass it on. We'll go to the next final question for this evening. He is again addressed to Mr. Babu. He says, you mentioned in your presentation that the info on sand dunes, and which is getting really eliminated by virtue of bringing the CRZ to 200 meters by the government. And how do you manage the government reduce it to 200 meters? The sand dunes naturally go off and the people construct something there. And what should be the government policy? The intervention of the courts were very, very severe and they demolished quite a bit, I know, up to 500 meters. When he brought it 200 meters, is it because of the government taking a very conscious decision, or is it political interference, or the demand of the people who would like to live on the coastal? I think it's a question which can be best answered by Mr. Sugathudat.
Not sure I grasped the essence of the question, but I think somewhere in my presentation I tried to make an effort to advocate for a biomass-based economy, and which I think by its very nature would scale down the kind of operations that we have today to a much more localized economy with local products. So I think that is in some way, or I mean, that the approach that we could probably take, but then it has to be a collective decision. Right now, everyone in any position of authority would like to chase bigger dreams and look at a globalized world. And a globalized world, the footprint is very large. And I think the difficult task is now to bring back or scale it down to what we were earlier, perhaps 30, 40, 50 years ago, when things, you could satisfy your needs from over a smaller footprint. You didn't have to create a larger footprint. Somewhere there, I think, is the answer. A biomass-based economy is perhaps the way out.
Thank you, sir. We have got, yes, please go ahead, Mr. Babu.
Regarding the sand dune and regulations, say it's more of political, and again, we have seen the impact through tsunamis and all. Past experience we have, but the thing is, there is insensitivity among the public. If people comes forward and oppose, and if they are aware of the adverse impact of eliminating the sand dunes and approaching towards the CRZ zones, and I think the opposition should come from the public as a movement and not from the government. Government has the regulations, but since we are very insensitive, and it's going on.
Thank you, sir. Awareness is thing. We got a number of questions, on relating to the electric vehicles. What India is doing on the Paris Agreement. Then what are we doing on thing? And one final question to all the things, because if we need to take all the questions, we have to still for quite some time. We'll have another day, because now we are committed to bring in every month something so that all these questions can be included, because clearly indicate how much the people are really interested in the environment today. And on the one final question, each of the thing is a rapid fire answer I want in one sentence from each of the panelists. On a scale of 10, how much would you rate India's step towards environmental preservation? On a scale of 10. I'll start with Mr. Sugathudat.
Yeah, I would say between 6 and 7 as of now.
Dr. Krishna Kumar? You unmute yourself.
With our population pressure and all other pressures, we are still doing good. I rate it at 7.
Okay. Nityananda?
One is difficult, but in terms of our policy and law, we might be 8. But in terms of what happens on the ground, it could be just 5.
Mr. Babu?
I go with Nityananda.
That is a very diplomatic answer. What is your answer? Okay, we go with you. And let me have the perspective of Mr. Peter Rimell from Germany. What do you think of India's scale on the 10 on the environmental preservation? In comparison, you are seeing quite a bit happening in Germany.
For India, I would also agree with Nityananda, and I think that's the same for Germany. Governments are always good in putting regulations. The second step of following up and having law enforcement, that's normally not working out that much. So I will not give precise figures, but the appearance is probably the same and comparable.
Dr. Krishna Kumar, other Krishna Kumar is over there. You would like to also? Yes, please.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I would like it at 8 to 9 out of 10. I will give a positive example for everybody in India. I know the non-conventional energy resources like solar power, etc., has been used very well, and especially for Cochin International Airport, it uses almost all of the resources through electrical energy developed by solar panels. So that can start at home, and it can lead to the mega level of global level, or whatever it is for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnamar. The students will love you to evaluate their papers. You are so generous. I think, Pankaj, you would like to have, what is your assessment, Mr. Pankaj, on a scale of 10? You have been doing quite a bit of conferences on these lines. Pankaj?
Yes, I would again go along with Nitya. Well, we are too rich in terms of regulations, but we are not implementing them well. But I would also go with Mr. Dutt, who, when he gave a philosophical reply about the biomass being the way forward, I think, and the market decides what should be the approach. I think that's where we need to take control and make this philosophy into a practical gesture by sensitizing everybody. And that is where CAS is heading with the Council for Social Development, by developing the curriculum, which shall be implemented at grassroots. This has to start from bottom up. The top-down approach is not going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Dipanka, your assessment on scale of 10, and also I request to give briefly a quick concluding remark before I close the panel discussion this evening. Dipanka.
I think somewhere around 6. As Dr. S. Krishna Kumar had said, in solar energy, we've been doing very well. I would scale it up a little bit. Okay. And I will just add on a few more points in my concluding remarks. Okay. So the others get a chance to complete it now.
Go ahead with your concluding remarks, Mr. Gold, okay, so that we'll make a presentation to the panelists on behalf of MA and the closing remarks. Quickly, briefly, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, you can do the concluding remarks. Most of the things have been very well discussed, but still your inputs will be very valuable to us. Mr. Dipanka.
Thank you very much. I wish to thank the esteemed hosts, the panelists, and the audience, most of whom we couldn't see, okay, for a wonderful evening of brainstorming and laying the the first building block for the decade for ecosystem restoration and sustainable development. Okay, MMA, KS, and Prakriti, I'm sure with the stable governance that we could have over the next 5 years, we could create good eco-restoration managers and entrepreneurs, okay, by honing their skill sets in 2 and 3 tier townships for sustainable development. They could go back to the basics, of all that, our speakers have mentioned, explore them, okay, and come out field trained to eke out beneficially, creative livelihoods that could slow down global warming and climate change. Incidentally, this is the year to 2021 is also the year of creative economy. Okay, so this creative economy for sustainable development is something that we got to merge along with this and take it forward. And I wish to thank Group Captain Vijay Kumar for the wonderful opportunity that we have all had and to take the matter forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dipankar. As a token of our appreciation on behalf of President MMA, on behalf of Conrad Stifting, the difficult time where we have been separated by the lockdown, this is what we thought we will do it to you. On behalf of you, we are presenting 500 face masks to the needy, because till the entire vaccine comes to us, protect us, I think is the only solution what we have. We also give under mini sanitizer. What we do is the MMA team goes around the number of places and educate the people and make them wear the mask and give them sanitizer. This really protection, I can probably say that the place where the MMA office is located, we have not any incidents of COVID, and in spite of all the people living on, our education is not that then people really got understood the importance of using mask and things. Thank you so much, each one of you. Thanks to our distinguished panelists, Peter Rimell, for joining us from Germany this evening. Your input was very valuable to us. Mr. Sugata Datta, we look forward to seeing you more. Your government perspective really matters for a discussion on this nature. Dr. Krishna Kumar, I have retired, for your insight. And Mr. Babu for sharing your perspective, for a great work you are organizing doing, and we would like forward to seeing you more. And Professor Nityananda, as usual, your insights are always good because we have been working together on a number of issues on settlement goal. Thanks for your insights and Dipankar Ghosh, as usual, for joining Prakriti as one of our partners, bringing together the great event this evening. I think it's a step in the right direction. And also other team from MMA who have been a great source of support to us. Team from CAS, especially Mr. Pankaj Madan, Simran Dingra, and others who are all joined today, this evening, Ashish and other people who have joined us and been great support to us. Thanks to each one of you. And I think the only message what everybody conveyed is you have to be aware of yourself and you have to take care of your nation which you belong to. Leave it to the future generation so that they don't say that you are really messed it up everything when you pass on to the baton to the future generation. Thank you so much. We will be having a series of events on these lines and so that everybody get educated on some of the issues which very, very frankly, we discussed quite a bit on environment, on major conclave seminars and presentations. At the end of the day, nothing really happened. And now we want to make it really interesting where it should be we would like to have a debate. We would like to have a quiz. This morning in the MMA quiz, what we shared, 50% of the quiz, we put it on environment actually, and you'll be surprised. Only 20% really answered many of them actually. This clearly indicate we will be doing some exclusive quiz to make awareness among the people today. And this is all some of the initiatives we'll be doing along with Conrad Shifting. Thanks to each one of you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us in big number. Over 1,075 people have watched this program live from various things. And if you missed this event, not to worry, all these recordings are available from next few minutes on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and also our MMA website webinar. And please do join in. If you have any question, log into our website, put it across, which will be really shared with all other panelists who are joined us this evening. Thank you. It's indeed a great pleasure and honor to have you with us. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night. We are always masked. I'm sitting in a closed environment like each one of you, so mask is not really necessary today. But otherwise, when you go out, please wear a mask. Thank you.
One request to Mr. Peter, if he could kindly facilitate MMA Chennai to allow celebration of the World Tourism Day every year from this year onwards. That is one real contribution it will be, which MMA has not thought of. The International World Tourism Day will be there somewhere in September end. So if that can be celebrated by MMA, it will be another feather to your cap. So I request Peter to consider this and then authorize. Thank you.
Well, if MMA has not thought of it as you have said yet, then we can try to think about it in the future. And let's talk about that together.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. International tourism is still an issue for us because the travel restrictions, the people are looking inward. I know how much it will help us. But what I would really appreciate if you can support us, let's have a tourism of how we should improve tourism our own states. How there are so many places in every state in India, people are not visited. So we should start looking inward. Each state should have a system where we should have an event, make them people understand.
Put the green there. Put the green there, green tourism.
Yes, green tourism. And so that is coming. More than happy to support you, Mr. Kumar. We'll discuss along with Dipankar and take it forward. Thanks so much for the great idea. Thank you, gentlemen, once again. Bye-bye till we meet again. Good night, stay safe and stay healthy, sir.
Night to all.